So Stats Canada came out with the latest figures on inflation last week, and according to that, GDP grew 0.8% and inflation dropped from 3.5 to 3.1, but it is still higher than the target levels. What does it mean for an average Canadian? We're going to talk about it in this video, so let's dive in. What is up, everybody? This is Yasin Nizami and you're watching The Passionate Realtor, which is the fastest growing YouTube channel focused on Canadian real estate market with a particular focus in Toronto GTA, as well as some of the macroeconomic factors that has an impact on the market. In this video, we're going to cover the latest CPI figures came out last week for the month of June. According to that, the inflation dropped from 3.5 to 3.1 compared to the month of May, but it is still higher than the target level of between 1 to 3. Now, what does it mean for an average Canadian? Right when the CPI figures were published, Bank of Canada's Governor Tiff Macklem, he wrote an opinion post in Financial Post, and he set up a narrative where he's trying to say that the rising inflation is temporary, is transitory, and Canadians should not be worried about it because that's his job as a Bank of Canada's chief to control inflation, to control the cost of living, and he's going to make sure that he does that for Canadians. So I think the question is, why is he coming out and writing an opinion blog? I think we have seen in the history that the media has been used to set up a narrative when they want to control the population in terms of setting up a certain narrative in their heads. That's how the media has been used for centuries, and I believe this is one of the tools they're using just before the elections. But one thing I need to clarify this for you about CPI. So this is the reason why I truly believe that CPI is not a true reflection of the real inflation, because if you look at it, the way Stats Canada measures CPI is based upon collecting some survey feedback from Canadians, from consumers, in terms of how much they pay on groceries, how much they pay on clothing, how much they pay on shoes, how much they pay on leisure activities like vacation and dining out, how much they pay on sporting goods, how much they pay on shelter. So when it comes to shelter, you'll be surprised they only measure the monthly rent, the monthly mortgage payment, and renovation cost. They don't measure the appreciating housing price, which we have seen it has gone like 30-40% across the country year over year. It is cost of living, isn't it? But guess what? CPI is not considering that. More so, when it comes to understanding inflation, the way they calculate inflation is because if the cost of consumer goods and services rising consistently or changing the price consistently year over year, then it is called inflation. But if the price of a goods and service goes up 1 year and in the next year it stays same, so the rate of change is zero. So in their eyes, there is no inflation. And this is where they're saying that inflation is transitory, it's temporary, because if we are seeing the rise of prices for goods and services for the reason of supply chain issue, then once they are resolved, those prices will not continue to go up. So they're saying that this inflation is transitory in that sense. But they're not telling you the whole story. And this is where I use this channel to bring an alternative view for Canadians to understand what's happening, behind the scene, which not any economist or any banker will tell you openly. Okay, when the biggest reason of rising inflation is basically the amount of unlimited money supply in the system. There are two ways the money is injected into the system. Number one, using commercial banks when they lend the money out, when they give you credit card loans, or when they give you mortgages or any personal equity loans. That's the brand new money entered into the system. So when you look at the consumer debt that has risen in the last 12 months, that is unprecedented. Okay, so that's number one way to inject money. Number two is by financing government fiscal debt. The government of Canada has spent, I think, almost $356 billion in the last year on different projects, giving out subsidies and benefits to the Canadians. And you need to understand where this money is coming from. That money is brand new money printed by Bank of Canada in return of purchasing government treasury bonds and that's how the new money is being entered into the system. So that money is created out of nothing. There was no goods and services, so brand new money created out of thin air, entered into the system, and that actually increased the pool of money in the system, which ultimately drives the inflation up. Nobody's talking about that, and because this is political tool, the government of Canada, the election is right around the corner, they're not going to tell you openly that, okay? But they are doing it in front of our eyes, and this is the reason why I believe the inflation is going to stay, even though they will tweak the CPI to reflect the inflation is below 3, but in reality, the inflation is much higher than that. You know that my grocery bill has gone up significantly compared to last year. So to me, inflation is much higher than that. And that problem is people do not really understand that. Even though the rate of inflation goes down from, let's say, 3 to 2, doesn't mean that the prices will go down. The prices will still continue to go up, but at a lower pace. Oftentimes people ask me a question, okay, when the interest rate will go up? Interest rate and inflation are kind of very closely linked to each other. In my opinion, I think interest rate cannot go up because our economy is still struggling. We don't have a lot of growth in the economy that it can sustain the rising interest rate. Especially our government, because government spending is historically high, and the amount of debt the government has taken from Bank of Canada, if the interest rate goes up from, let's say, 0.25 to 3, the government will likely to default on its sovereign debt because they will not be able to service the debt payments because they have taken the debt on 0.25 overnight interest rate, and if it goes to 3%, it certainly becomes a difficult task for the Canadian government to pay off that debt where there is not much revenue being generated out of the struggling economy. Not to mention the consumer debt has also risen significantly in the last 12 to 18 months. So if the interest rates started climbing up, you will see a lot of insolvencies happening, left and right. So I think until the economy is booming and it is, the GDP, it climbs up at 2, 3, 4%, we are not in a position to increase the interest rate. The prices that we are seeing rising, they're going to stay stable, if not going up. But don't think that the prices will go down next year because of Government of Canada's narrative that the inflation is transitory. That includes real estate as well. We are seeing the real estate market is cooling down, but the prices are not. When the benchmark price is set, it's going to stay at that level unless we see a significant drop of demand. The demand is not dropping. People are still willing to buy houses. We are expecting the borders to be open and we will see the external immigrants will come in. And the first thing, what they're going to do? Acquire real estate. If you're still holding up and thinking the prices of real estate will go down and then you will buy, you can wait for sure, but I think this is not likely to happen. The prices will stay the same, if not going up, but they're not going down because the market is still very competitive. The rates are still low, the demand is still there, and because of inflation, acquisition is going to continue going up. That's it for me this week. As always, I appreciate your support and your likes and your comments. So please put your comment down below and I will be more than happy to answer, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.